Hi everyone and welcome to
Muted.
our Personal Digital Archiving. I'm Stephanie Lamson. On behalf of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee and the Preservation Week Working Group, I'm happy to introduce this free webinar as part of ALA's Preservation Week. Many thanks to our sponsor of today's webinar, the Media Preserve. Our presenter today is Mike Ashenfelder, Digital Preservation Project Coordinator at the Library of Congress. Mike has worked for the National Digital Information Infrastructure and Preservation Program since 2003. He writes about personal digital archiving and developments in digital preservation. He also produces public information videos and podcasts. Before joining the Library of Congress, he worked for a decade in the Bay Area as a technical writer. Mike has a bachelor's degree in music education from the Berklee College of Music and a master's in music history from San Francisco State University. Before we begin, a few quick notes on today's webinar. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box on your screen, and Mike will do his best to answer as many questions as possible at the conclusion of his presentation. Also, please note that today's presentation will be recorded and available at the LEX webinar website and on YouTube. You're also invited to use the Twitter back channel, #ALCTSCE, to interact with other participants during the webinar. However, please continue to submit questions for the presenters in the question box on the screen. The presenter and host will not monitor Twitter during the presentation. With that, I'll turn the program over to Mike. There may be a short pause.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can you see my screen okay? Can you all see my screen okay? All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mike Ashenfelder, and I'm new to webcasting, so forgive any kind of clumsiness for the first minute or so. The purpose of this presentation is to spread information about personal digital archiving and to empower you all with tools and resources for managing your digital photos and your other digital files. It's very easy, and the bottom line is that no one will take as much interest in your digital stuff as you do. And so let's start with the problem with digital files. When you compare them to paper files and documents, paper photos, you can put those things in a shoebox, and you can ignore them for years and trust that you can enjoy them at any time. You could pull them out decades later. And if you store them properly, they should be just fine. But 21st century digital valuables are different. They're the photos that we have on our cell phones, email, blogs, tweets, digital video, websites, all of that. We have digital possessions just dispersed all over the place, and they require different considerations. The challenge is that they all need a special storage container. So flash drives, CDs, DVDs, hard drives, and of course it requires software too, but the main thing is this digital storage container, which is somewhat equivalent to a shoebox. But the problem with those is they each have different vulnerabilities and a limited lifespan. If you ask me or any of my colleagues what the best thing to store your digital files on is, we can't say, and it would be foolish for us to guess because nothing is 100% guaranteed. CDs can flick. I lost a brown flash drive in the woods, and I have no hope of finding it ever again. They can snap off in a computer. At my house, we dropped a hard drive by accident, and it just died. And it would cost a few $100s to get any digital forensics done off of it, so we had to pass because we were fairly sure that the stuff on it wasn't valuable, but there's the point of it being everything being somewhat fragile. But more than that is this idea of obsolescence, and that's the main consideration. You may hear occasionally a mention of bit rot, as if something on a drive or on a CD can just decay organically like an apple or something. But that's a debatable thing. The main problem with your digital stuff is that it could be stuck on obsolete media. If you still have stuff on floppy drives, more and more new generations of computers don't include floppy drives. So, you know, this is a good time to pull it off of the old drives, zip drives. All these obsolete media, as time passes, it becomes harder to extract the stuff and harder to find the devices to play it. It's also easy to lose track of all your digital stuff, given how much we use the internet, our cell phones, our whole digital lives. Things are online, they're hidden somewhere in our computers. Again, they're on floppies and CDs. They're dispersed all over the place. When it comes to online services like email, social media, even cloud storage, they could go out of business or they could get hacked. And that's not to raise any unnecessary paranoia, but it's just a fact of life. Some very smart people take it as a challenge to hack commercial sites or government sites just to see if they can. So we all share the same, institutionally and personally, we all share the same, we all have the same risk, and that's the risk of loss and not being able to get our stuff back. The solution is fairly straightforward, and we've narrowed it down to about 4 very general steps. One is to identify what you want to save, and that's to find everything and where it is, and I'll get more into detail on each of these steps. It's a good time to decide what's important to save. You need to organize your collection and then back it up into different places. And most importantly, again, the idea of obsolescence. You want to move your collection to a storage medium, a current storage medium, about once every 5 to 7 years. Or if you use something frequently, like a flash drive, maybe upgrade it about every so often, about every 5 to 7 years. When you buy a new computer, that's a good time. So first, identify what you want to save. This is a good time to download your email, and I'll give a URL at the end of this talk. On our site, digitalpreservation.gov, we have lots of good information on how you can download email or transfer video from DVDs and so forth. But you want to get your stuff off of all the drives, all the floppies from your accounts. You can go to Facebook, and in the settings, the account settings there, it'll enable you to download your Facebook stuff. Just gather it together from everywhere. Decide, this is a good time to do a little clutter clearing. And decide what's most important for you to save. You know, if you have 200 photos of autumn leaves, you really need 200 photos of autumn leaves. You know, maybe narrow it down to the best 4 or 5. Photos that you take at family gatherings, I'm sure that out of 30 or 40 of them, there are probably 4 or 5 that are really good, and the rest are just people with their eyes half closed or laser eyes or something like that. So this is a good time. This is an archival step, actually, you know, deciding things of value, but this is a good step to do that at. As far as organizing, folks from the library community can suggest, you know, a lot of professional ways to organize, but you know, you can have your own system. Just be consistent. Make it a logical system. You can store it by file type, you know, audio files in one, photos in one. You could store it by date, by event. Descriptive folders and file names, they help you find things later on. And God forbid if something were to happen to you and somebody needed to go through your stuff, make it easy for others to find your things as well. Not only for you to re-find things, but you want to be able to make stuff findable. Nothing complex. As far as backup, again, nothing is 100% safe. So you want to copy the folder to at least 2 different types of storage devices. It's just a matter of hedging your bets. And this is a small detail, but it's important, and that's that once you copy something over from a drive to your computer, double check it, especially if it's something very important, a very, you know, wedding photos or something like that. You know, if the file size says 0, then that means that there's nothing there. Double click on it. You don't have to click on every one of 500 files. You know, just spot check your stuff to make sure that it's copied over okay. And then save it in different locations. So you have it on different kinds of backups, but, you know, save 1 copy in your summer home, 1 copy in your winter home, 1 copy in the trunk of your car, 1 at a relative's house. You know, just save them in different locations in case something happens to your house or your office. want to have a backup somewhere else. And in the institutional community, we have that all major cultural institutions have a geographic copy, geographically located copy of everything. The Library of Congress has a copy of their entire digital collection about 70 miles away from here in case something happens in Washington. So it's all the same practice to save a copy somewhere else. Now, storage services like the so-called cloud, they are good services. Again, they could be hacked, but it's good for a backup, and also they're good in that if you have something backed up to a cloud service, don't worry about doing the upgrades, the hardware upgrades. You just pay your monthly fee, but it should only be a backup. It should never ever be the main place where you store stuff. Professional photographers who have a lot invested in their digital photos these days, they have this 3-2-1 rule, which is kind of handy to remember, and that's to make 3 copies of everything, saved to at least 2 different types of storage media, and then save 1 in a different location from where you live. And then move your collection to the storage medium every once to 5 or 7 years, or before your current device becomes obsolete. Upgrade a flash drive if you use it a lot, just because something might happen to it. The number 5 to 7 is, we're sort of pulling that out of the air, but only sort of. In the ongoing conversations that we have at the Library of Congress with the with storage device makers, hard drive makers, and server makers, they all agree that we can't really see past, to try and guess what happens in 10 years or 20 years would be unrealistic. So they're guessing 5 to 7 years. Who knows what's going to happen after that. And another way to look at it is maybe every time you change your computer, every time you upgrade your computer, you also buy some new backup devices. So that's a good reminder there. This digital estate, the topic of a digital estate has been emerging a lot. It has emerged recently, and you might hear more about it in time, because in addition to writing a will and leaving instructions for what to do with your finances, with your material holdings, you also have a lot of things of digital value. So, maybe make up a list and letting a loved one know where you store your important stuff. Which email accounts you have and what passwords you have for them. People have not only documents, but there's, in some instances with online communities, there's virtual money. So there could be a lot at stake, a lot of value. And I've also heard that there is a new breed of professional emerging that work with attorneys. They're kind of an intermediary. Where they kind of advise attorneys in drawing up wills on how to handle the digital estate. So it's something to consider. Now, digital photos of all of the files that we have at risk, digital photos are the #1 type of file. Just about everybody has a cell phone, and just about every cell phone has a camera. And most of us are walking around with very valuable photos on our camera. So it helps to look at photos a little bit. We try not to get too technical, to not burden you or bore you with technical details, but it helps to look at digital photos a little bit and what they're made of and how they work. So when you take a digital photo, 4 things happen immediately. First, the camera saves the photo as a file. Second, it names the file, usually with some alphanumeric name. Third, it inserts technical information inside the file, and we'll get into that more in a minute. And then lastly, it saves the file in a JPEG format, and that's on most consumer cameras. So starting at the top, the camera saves
Hi,
the
Mike.
photo.
This is Mike. This is Stephanie. I'm just going to interrupt.
Yeah.
This is Stephanie for a minute. We're having a little bit of trouble with some audio. You sound okay to me, but not some others. So for the others who are listening, if they can try to adjust their volume up, and if you can just try to hug the mic,
Sure.
hopefully that'll solve the problem. Okay. Sorry
Is
to
better?
interrupt. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds better to me,
Okay.
but thank you very much.
Is this a good time to start again? All right. So the first part of digital photos is that the camera saves the photo as a file, which means that you treat it like any other file that you want to back up. Get your photos off of the camera and back them up as soon as possible. Secondly, the camera names the file. It assigns a name to the file. Well, you can change the name without affecting the file at all, especially if it's something that's very important to you. Give it a name that will help you find it again. Now, this is an important step. The camera embeds technical information into the file. The technical information usually has to do with the settings of the camera. You know, the things that you don't, again, need to be bothered with, the shutter speed, the light settings, but it does put that right into the photo itself. What you can do with proper software, and it's easy to get software, is you can add a description right into the photo file, just in the same way you could write a description on the back of the paper photo. So there's software like, now of course we can't recommend anything, but Photoshop is a typical software. You can just do a search online for adding descriptions to digital photos. But that comes with a warning. There are some photo managing software packages that appear to let you add descriptions to the photo. Well, you add descriptions, like we have iPhoto at my house. And you can add descriptions to each individual photo, but it actually goes into a database. It doesn't go into the photo itself. So before you start adding descriptions or getting excited about adding descriptions, you might want to check about the package that you're using. See if it'll enable you to add descriptions to the photos. Now, another warning is that if you add descriptions to the photo files and you upload them to social media sites and some photo sites, it might wipe out the description that you took the time to enter into it. It's just how they work. So a good rule of thumb about that is to back up your original. Don't never throw away your original just because you have a copy uploaded online. Your online place, again, should only be a backup and never the main thing. Now the camera saves a file in a JPEG format. That's most consumer cameras. And unless you're going to do any very fancy photo processing, don't worry about a format. Don't listen to anyone else if they tell you that it should be this format or that format. Just the camera knows what it's doing. Just leave it as it is and back up the original photo. Now, something that's important to consider also is that the photos do get modified in a certain way. Again, when you upload them, when you take a photo, sometimes your camera will say, do you want to save it as the highest quality, the medium, the lowest quality? So we're going to look at that. Digital photos, and it helps to understand the composition of a digital photo. Digital photos are made up of millions of colors and shaded dots or squares, and they're called pixels. So there's a measurement to each camera, and it helps to look at this image. This image is 10 pixels wide, and the measurement in cameras is usually measured by the inch. So they would measure this image as, if this image was an actual inch, it would be 10 dots per inch, or 10 dpi, or sometimes it's ppi. You might see that. Now, why that's significant is that the more dots or pixels that you have crammed into an inch, the more dense and sharp the photos will be, and the higher the quality of the photo. It's just richer. But the fewer the dots or pixels per inch, the lower the quality of the photo. So that's significant because sometimes when you upload photos, they may reduce the file to the photo. It's called compression. They squish it down. And again, with your camera settings, it may ask you if you want to save the photo you just took in the highest quality, the medium, or the lowest quality. So if it's just sometimes I'll be shopping, and if I'm not sure the thing I'm buying, I'll take a quick photo and text it to my family and say, is this what you want? That's not a very high quality photo, but something of my grandmother, sitting outside at sunset, I would want that as the highest quality photo. So that's a consideration. Another reason for compressing a photo is that it's easier to attach it to an email because it's smaller than the original photo. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but the result of compression is that if you look in the background to any photo, there's a color palette, just like an artist's palette of paints. So an original photo palette might have thousands of colors to show gradations of this fine photograph. And if you say, okay, if you get a question from the camera and it says, do you want to compress this? And you say yes, it'll toss colors. It'll just toss them. And with each color, each pixel that it tosses out of the palette, the photo gets smaller. But the result is that it lowers the quality. It lowers the number of pixels in the photo's palette. So the picture just doesn't look that good. So once a photo is, and let me go back to that again because it's pretty dramatic. And the problem there is that once you compress something, once you toss out all of the colors in the palette, you can never get them back again. They're gone for good. So that's why you should always safely preserve the originals and work only with copies. Never work with the original. If you're trying to remove red eye, if you're cropping a photo, back up the original somewhere else and work with a copy. Now, even though this isn't about digital preservation per se, scanning comes up a lot. We get asked a lot about scanning, partially because scanning manuals are often very cryptic. And again, sometimes a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So you might hear a lot of conflicting bits of information about the settings for scanners. After asking around here at the library, among our photo professionals, we've come up with two round numbers for you. And one is that if you're going to scan an original photo that's 4 by 6 or 5 by 7 or even 8 by 10, you could set it to 300 DPI or 300 PPI. When you're doing some scans, sometimes I've been told the scanner might even reset the DPI or PPI settings. So you need to check it periodically. But any higher than that for these types of photos, there's no real perceptible difference. You're not gaining a whole lot. So 300 DPI or 300 PPI for these average size photos. Now for a slide or a tiny photo, you go back to this idea of pixels per inch. If you measured a slide in inches, it's probably all over what, like 1.5 inches wide. Well, you have a lot of information crammed into that 1.5 inches, so you want to capture more pixels per inch. So 1800 is a good setting for slides. You need more dots or pixels per inch to capture all of the richness of a photo. And if you have a choice of file format in which to save the scanned photo or the slide, JPEG is still the most common standard. You might see a whole list of file types or formats, but JPEG is still just perfectly fine, and it'll be around for years. There are a lot of people that have commercial interests in JPEGs, and they'll keep JPEGs alive for a while. And when that changes, ideally, we'll all have some way to automatically change it over. Some websites will only let you upload JPEG, so just leave it set at JPEG. Now, in summary, you want to, with archiving all your personal digital possessions, you want to identify what you want to save, decide what's most important to save, organize your collection, any way you want, and then back them up in different places. And in this, again, the idea of obsolescence, move your collection to a current media every 5 to 7 years. And there's one more thing to say. Excuse me, that wasn't it. Pardon me. The public library is still your best information resource. And public libraries lately have been moving to offer digital literacy by offering the use of their scanners, pardon me, for about 10 seconds. It's cough drop time. Many public libraries, they offer help with genealogy, with family history and local history. And again, by offering use of their scanners, maybe even hosting for some of the files. It's become the center for digital literacy in the community. Now, as such, the library has started working with the Library of Congress has been working with the American Library Association, Public Libraries Online, or the Public Library Association and the ALCTS to offer the resources that we have on our website. And again, I'll give you that URL in a few moments to help spread information about personal digital archiving and advice on personal digital archiving. It helps us if we get feedback from you. So when I give you my email address, I encourage you to please drop me an email if you have any questions. And no question is too simple. For example, at past events, we've gotten one question was on how to get photos off of cameras. And it's, you know, to some folks that might seem perfectly obvious, but not to everybody. So we have brochures on how to do that. If you are at a family function, let's say, and somebody takes a video and they burn a DVD, they'll give you a DVD of that, and that's fine for as long as DVDs last, but they won't last forever. So how do you get the video file? And in fact, recently I met a woman who, unfortunately her husband passed away recently, but the funeral home gave her, they got photos from her. They assembled all the photos into a slideshow, and then they burned a video of this slideshow. And you know, naturally, she treasures this slideshow. But it's on a DVD, and that DVD will be obsolete in no time. So we had to show her how to rip the video off of the DVD. Text messages. You can get text messages off of your phone. Maybe you've had a correspondence with somebody that you really value, that you really treasure, and you want to save the correspondence. Well, it does reside on your phone, and it's easy to get it off. And one more thing about Public Libraries Online is that we started writing a blog post bi-weekly. And I think the next one is next Monday. Our first one was 2 weeks ago, and we intend to have it every couple of weeks. Reviewing this material, we'll go more into depth about other ways to save your digital stuff. So I believe that's it. I apologize for the cough. I have a cold. And for I'll take any questions now, so we'll go back to Stephanie. And even after this presentation, please email me if you have any questions that might occur to you later, or if you don't get a chance to ask them now. And also, please go to our site, digitalpreservation.gov/personal archiving. And we not only have brochures there, but we do have videos. We have podcasts with digital preservationists, and it's a rich source of information. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. So time for questions. Let's see here. Here's one. There's a few about JPEG files. Some people say a JPEG file deteriorates. Is that true?
I can't say that with any authority. I do not know, and no, I don't know. That's the first I've ever heard of it. And in fact, one of the new emerging standards is JPEG 2000, which is becoming a standard, for an archivable standard, and you can also say video in JPEG 2000. So I doubt it, but I don't know it for a fact, and I'll look into that and put something online if it is indeed true.
Okay. Yeah, I wondered if they were thinking of maybe if a file was opened and then saved and opened and then saved, the compression was happening during that
Oh, actually,
process as opposed to just opening and not saving. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing to that. Usually when something happens to a file, corruption of a file or damage to a file, it happens when you're moving it from one place to another. So it happens when you're taking it off your flash drive and putting it into a computer. Engineers call that a single point of failure. So the file, I don't believe that anything just organically or naturally happens to a file if it just resides somewhere. I think that it gets damaged in the transfer.
Okay. Yeah, there's some more questions about that too. There's a popular question for the day about, another one says, does frequently opening digital photos degrade the quality, or is that due to compression?
I think that is two different things. Compression is something that you do to a file. You deliberately squish it. You choose to squish it. Frequently, opening a file, you're just displaying the file. You're using the software to display the file. And no, I don't believe that frequently opening the file does anything to it. But it's also a good case for backing up something that you really value, a document or a photo or something like that. Because something could happen. The software could have some effect on it, or a virus could get into it somehow. So I don't think there's a direct cause and effect between frequently opening a file, but again, I would back up the original and mess with a copy.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Someone asked, you mentioned scanning at 300 dpi for the standard photograph sizes. Would you use a different DPI if you were scanning a color photograph versus a black and white photograph? I
don't believe so. These are all, unfortunately, very good and very stumping questions. We just had a three-part, one of our photo preservationists, I didn't put the URL for our blog. I'll give that URL. It's blog.loc.gov/digital preservation. And again, that's blog.loc.gov/digital preservation. But there's a three-part blog post on the down to the molecular level almost of scanning. And I'm guessing that, and I don't know if you want to hear a guess, but it's back to this idea of palette. So a black and white palette or a color palette is still a palette, that contains gradations of an image. So I think that scanning at 300 dpi works equally well for color or black and white.
So another question is, I've heard that TIFFs are better for preservation over JPEGs. Is that no longer the case?
It is the case, but this idea of saving things as a JPEG is like general consumer information. If you want to save it as a TIFF, that's fine. TIFFs are unwieldy for, again, if you want to upload something to Facebook, I think they only accept JPEGs. Or a lot of social media sites only accept JPEGs. So a TIFF is it is a higher density, more sophisticated photo format. But if you just want to save your stuff, I wouldn't stress too much over the format type.
So here's a question more about storage. Are there any benefits to archival quality CDs or DVDs, or will regular ones do fine?
These are great questions. I believe what is it? The gold CDs?
Yeah, the gold CDs.
Yeah, they're of a better quality. Yeah, they're of a better quality, but just by way of like an anecdote about storing stuff on CDs. When I talked to a photographer a few years ago. He was a professional photographer who dutifully backed up all of his stuff to CDs, and he had something like 400 CDs that he had been saving since the early 2000s. Now he's got a server or a hard drive to put all of his stuff on, and he has to load individually 400 CDs to put them onto a hard drive. It's just easier to move things around and to store things when they're all grouped together on essentially a larger storage medium, a larger container. A hard drive is a larger container than a CD. So, yeah, gold standard's better if you're going to use CDs, but I would get things onto a larger container as soon as you can. It's just easier to manage.
Okay. Let's see. If you want to print a larger photo than the original scanned, do you still use 300 DPI when scanning?
No, that would be a larger DPI setting.
Okay, so that you would have the resolution when you were blowing it up larger.
Exactly.
Okay. Is a hard drive for backup of photos better than a flash drive?
That's a tricky question because hard drives up until now have had a spinning disk with actual moving parts, and now the new breed of hard drives is the solid state, the same as a flash drive. So hard drives, you buy a terabyte drive, it's essentially a huge flash drive. So I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but one is becoming the other. Again, hard drives are becoming like big flash drives.
So there's another question about file naming conventions. Do you recommend a certain number of characters or a certain source for file naming conventions? And the person mentions that they've had trouble transferring files with long names or characters.
Again, another good question. I would hope that those days are over. I think that computers are getting sophisticated enough where they don't limit you to a certain number of characters. It wasn't that long ago when you did have a limited number of characters, and it would truncate, it would clip off the file name, but I don't think that's much of a consideration these days. Unless you have an old system.
Okay, let's see. Lots of questions, so it's taking me a while to go through. What about working with negatives? I assume that she's talking about scanning negatives, if you would change your recommendations there.
I don't know a thing about scanning negatives. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that works. Oh, and one more thing, if I could go back to the hard drive versus flash thing. Come to think of it, when we dropped our hard drive, it was a spinning disk, and that was the problem, was getting things off the spinning disk, but it's easier to get things off the solid state drive. So I wouldn't want to recommend flash, but I think that a flash is a little more stable. A solid state drive is more stable than a spinning disk. Again, it comes down to simple mechanics. There's fewer moving parts.
Okay. Another question, this one's more about adding metadata or descriptive information to photos. If you add descriptive information using a particular software, will any other software enable you to view that information, or is it all proprietary?
No, it's not proprietary. Different packages, I'm trying to remember the name of the one that Google has. But when you, I know I'm more familiar with Photoshop. So if you open up a photo in Photoshop and you just go to the information, like about this file, it'll bring up a dialog box that has, name, description, author. So the fields are a certain way in Photoshop. The fields are arranged in different ways with different packages, but essentially it's about the same information. So there's always something for keywords, it's essentially the same information, so you should be able to view it. There's no real proprietary format for photo metadata. And in fact, if you want more information, there's a whole organization devoted to that, and they're simply called photometadata.org.
Okay, there's another question, getting back to file formats again. Someone says, someone told me to take and save photos in RAW. Is this better than JPEG?
It is. It is. Again, our consumer advice says, just leave it as JPEG and don't worry about it. But RAW is a more malleable. I don't know if that's the right word. It's a more wide open format, but that's what professional photographers would use to go in and have more digital information to mess with and to manipulate. So if you intend to do any digital photo processing, RAW is good. But if you just want to save it just save it, store the original, and not worry about it, I would save it as the highest quality JPEG.
Okay. Another question. Are there resources for archiving different social media like Twitter, tweets, LinkedIn profiles, blog posts, etc.?
Each website, just like with emails, they have different policies towards downloading files. So you just have to do an online search for how to download your files or how to archive your files. And then again, I know that with Facebook you can go to your account and there's an option in there somewhere to download your information. But the main point is to get the digital stuff, whether it comes down as HTML files or the photos that you put online, just to get the files themselves. And then do all this, the backup stuff that we recommended.
Okay, so you're saying get it out of the cloud and onto your local.
Exactly, get it off of online. Yeah, get it off of online, and the same with emails. I know with email programs, for example, there are some desktop-based email programs, and so your emails actually reside on your desktop in a folder somewhere. But with Yahoo or Gmail or Hotmail or any of those, they all have different policies towards letting you download your stuff. And when you do get it, when you do get access to it, some will enable you to and some won't. But when you do get it, you will more than likely get it as a text file, as a simple text file, which is readable by just about every computer. It's a very neutral, vanilla, unadorned format. But it'll be one long, kind of like a ticker tape, one long file, and that's what you would back up once you download it.
Okay. Let's see. What storage device do you find is best for digital photos?
See. No, we really can't recommend anything.
Right.
Depends on how much you want to store. Get the most you can, get a terabyte if you can. And it's fine if you want to put it on a CD, but don't put everything on a CD or a DVD. Put it on a backup drive. And again, the new breed is a solid state. It'll be different in 10 years. So, put it on two different things. But we couldn't make any single recommendation. And in fact, at the Library of Congress and other cultural institutions, they back it up to a server, which is a spinning disk, but they also back it up to storage tape. So they, too, have two different types of storage, not giving preference to either one. Yeah. So we can't recommend anything really.
Okay. A couple of people have asked if you could repeat the 3-2-1 photographer rule, or at the beginning of the presentation.
Absolutely. You make 3 copies. If you take a photo of a sunset, and it's just the most stunning sunset ever, you have your original and make 2 copies. Maybe save one on your computer, save one on a backup drive, and save the third somewhere else. So you save 3 copies, you make 3 copies, put 2 on 2 different devices, and then 1 off-site somewhere else. And you keep it on a thumb drive in your car or at the office or at a relative's house or a friend's house. 3, 2, 1.
Okay. And someone also asked if you could repeat the blog URL.
Absolutely. It's blog.loc.gov/digital preservation. That's all one word, digital preservation.
Okay. Here's a slightly different one. Can exposure to magnetization erase photos from CDs or DVDs?
You know, that's a good question. I don't believe it can. We pass at the Library of Congress here and in most every major building, at least federal buildings, you have to pass through scanners, which isn't exactly magnetization,
right.
But that doesn't damage anything. I would guess that no, I'm not even going to guess. I don't know.
Okay, another question. Let's say you've imported photos to your computer or backup device. Should you rename the originals or the copies that you're going to edit?
Good question. That's a good question because you don't want to overwrite. You know, if you have two things of the same name can't reside in the same place. One will say, do you want to replace this file with a file of the same name? You know, the organization is up to you. If you've gone through the trouble of naming this sunset, sunset.jpg, you might name the copy sunsetcopy.jpg. Or, you know, you can name the original sunset original.jpg. It's up to you. Yeah, the naming convention is entirely up to you. But that's a good question in that if you keep the same name and you start moving things around in the same name, one thing will overwrite the other. And you may end up overwriting the original by mistake with a lesser quality copy.
Okay. Another question, is it okay to store the disk or flash drive in a lockbox that is fireproof?
Sure.
Let's see. Can scanning negatively affect the image of an old photograph? If so, what alternative do you suggest to get old documents and photos in digital format?
No, I don't believe that it can. I just came from a presentation not an hour and a half ago that was put on in conjunction with the people from the Preservation Directorate here at the Library of Congress, where she was talking about storing photos. And it seems that the damage, any damage going through old photos is one of the main things is light, like sunlight. Direct exposure, long-term exposure to sunlight will wash it out. Humidity will adversely affect it, and then some things just fade in time. A lot of my family photos from the 50s and the 60s, I don't quite understand the chemical composition, but I know that they faded awfully. The colors faded, and a lot of them were blurry. But the act of just running a scanning light over it will not hurt it.
Yeah, that's what, in the webinar we did yesterday on preserving family photographs, she said the same thing, that you could scan, as long as you weren't going to scan them 500 times,
yeah,
you would be fine with scanning once or twice. Let's see. Are there temperature or light standards for storage of disks and jump drives, etc.?
The general, you know, I don't know any numerical standards, but the general rule of thumb is that devices react well in an environment that is comfortable to you. So if you store them in the attic in July in New York City, well, they don't have attics in New York, but you know what I'm getting at. If it's stored in a very hot and humid environment, something that you would be uncomfortable with, the chances are good that something may fail in the device on a hard drive. And the same thing is if you store something in a cellar, in a humid, cold cellar, something might corrode within it, you know, and you would be uncomfortable in a cold, damp cellar. So save it in some place where you would be equally comfortable. You know, you don't have to reserve a couch, you know, a comfy chair for your stuff, but you know, you want it in a reasonably, you know, temperature between 50 and 70 degrees and humidity of like 40% or something like that. You know, something you would be comfortable with.
Okay. See, a couple administrative things. When you receive an email at the end of the presentation, which you'll get if you register, there'll be a link to the blog in the email, just for those of you who are asking about the blog address.
Good.
Another question. Well, I think we've covered that one, actually. The question box is moving so fast, it's hard for me to focus on one. Let's see here. Could you give an example of which programs add descriptions to the photos and which go into a database? So I guess you talked about how some programs have the descriptive information in a separate database and not actually in the photos. She's wondering if you could talk about what software that is a little bit.
And I did go through that pretty quickly. Again, Adobe Photoshop and there's a free one that Google offers.
Is that Picasa? Some people were suggesting Picasa.
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I've used myself too.
Exactly. Yeah, and
okay.
And they will enable you to add descriptions within the photos. And the advantage of that is that if you add a description to a photo and give me a copy, give it to me on a drive, I can open it up and I can see that information. You know, with the right software, but I can see that information. And I believe that the industry is going to catch up to consumer demand as time goes on. We work pretty closely with photometadata.org and other professional photographers in setting standards. And we hope that in time and not too far down the road, you can actually do this with your digital camera. You can add a description somehow to the photo itself. And they, in turn, are trying to work with the large organizations like Facebook and Flickr to not strip this stuff out. An example of a program that uses a database. Well, we have Macintoshes at our house, so iPhoto is one where you open up the photos and there's lots of detailed information and keywords that you can add to the photos that you see, but that information only goes into a database that points at the original photo. It's not embedded in the photo itself. I didn't know that until I started working on this project, so it appears that you're actually associating information with the photo, but it's deceptive. So if you have a certain program that came with your camera, let's say, or you know, Camtasia again is a good bet. It's free, but if you're in the habit of using any other one to do stuff online, like with Shutterfly or any of those, you know, just do an online search and see if it'll add. Just search for add description, digital photo, and whatever the name of the program is.
Okay. One person's asking if you have a handout or information about pulling text messages off a phone.
We do. We do. If you go to the blog, I wrote a story on that. In fact, I've been told that if you just do a Google search on pulling text messages off a phone, that blog story will throw it up. But in brief, it depends on whether you have a smartphone or a not smartphone. I don't know what they call it, a basic phone. And basic phones will let you take out the cards little data cards, and you could buy a reader. I understand they're fairly cheap, and you pop the card into the reader, and you'll see these files. They're text files, and then you can back it up to your computer. Smartphones, you can get apps that will enable you to do the same thing, so that when you plug your smartphone into the computer, you can just transfer the text files over. And it's very, very common. Unfortunately, police use it a lot. You know, it's usually common in extreme cases like with detectives and people that are doing some kind of crime-related forensics. But there are consumer resources available and consumer tools.
Okay. Someone else has asked what format you would recommend to save a Word document.
If it's very important, I would save a copy as PDF. PDF is a standard. Okay, the thing about Word documents, and again, we at the library, we're not permitted to give negative or positive recommendations, so I can't say anything against Word. Mm-hmm. And I use Word all the time, as most people in offices do. But you don't know if that current version of Microsoft Word will be supported in 10 years. You don't know if Microsoft will be around in 10 years, but you know, chances are they will. But maybe the version from 2013 won't be supported in 2025. There's a lot of work being done. So that is a proprietary format. It's specific to the Microsoft product and Microsoft software. PDF has a wider reach, and more people support PDFs. So if it's a very important document, I think Microsoft Word even has a Save As option, where you can either save it as a PDF file, or print it as a PDF file. But it's fairly easy to convert it to PDF. And having said that, TXT files, text files, are still the most basic, broadly accepted standard, but that strips out any formatting. So if you've written something important, or you have something with a fancy layout, or something that you want to preserve, a text format will get rid of all that. So if you don't mind unfanciness, a text file is probably the best, but PDF is still a great option.
Okay. Someone just followed up on that, asking, what about RTF files?
RTF, I don't know much about. I'm sorry.
Rich text.
Yeah.
Okay.
My colleagues do. I can't run out in the hall and grab anybody.
Maybe that one's for later. Let's see. Here's a question about regarding resolution. Since the web uses a resolution of 72 dpi, does it pay to use images with a higher resolution on the web?
I don't think so. I don't save anything. Even this PowerPoint presentation, I tried to compress it just to send it to you all, and it gave me some numerical settings, and one was a lower DPI. And I selected it because it said, do you want to display it, do you want to print it, or do you want to display it on the screen? And it's the same thing with the web. 72 DPI is kind of the going standard, so anything more than that is pretty much wasted on the viewer. Did that make sense? Did that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so. So I think we have one last question, which is, what have been your major challenges in the digital preservation education front, and how are you combating them?
Outreach.
Okay.
Outreach, just simply getting the information out. We do have a lot of information on our website, on the blog, and on digitalpreservation.gov. But realistically, the majority of people in the country and the world don't come to the Library of Congress website. You know, we get researchers, we get students, but not a lot of people beat a path to our door. And we have given presentations in local public libraries, and got a great reception, just a terrific reception. People are just happy to see us, happy to be able to, like you all, are happy to, we're grateful to be able to ask questions and get some straight answers. Hopefully these were straight. We do, this is Preservation Week, and we do have public presentations, but they're small numbers. At the book festival, the National Book Festival, we have a table set up, and people, line up, and we reach maybe 80 or 100 people at a time. But that's why we're working with the ALA, the PLA, and the ALCTS, because we hope to have this information made available through local public libraries. Local public libraries are more and more becoming the source for this sort of information, and it's been our experience that librarians are grateful for the resources. So we have great hope for a future relationship to expanding it with public librarians and public libraries.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thanks, Mike. That was great. You've given everyone some really practical information to help them better preserve their own digital materials.
And thank you all for the questions. I've written down some of them, and we do address questions. Anything that had me stumped, like scanning negatives, or what do you do with what's the best file format for words? I'll go back and I'll put it to my colleagues, and we'll write up a clear explanation of it. So we do welcome any questions.
Okay, great. So for more information about preservation, please visit ALA's Preservation Week website, where you can find great tips and resources to help you preserve your digital materials and other family treasures. And thanks again to today's sponsor, the Media Preserve. We would also like to thank our Preservation Week spokesperson, Steve Berry, for his support of preservation in ALA's Preservation Week. And last but not least, thanks to Felicity Dykes for her technical assistance today. Please consider joining us for our last Preservation Week webinar on choosing archival supplies with Peter Verheyen tomorrow. More information about these and other upcoming webinars, web courses, and e-forums can be found on the ALCTS webinar website. We hope you found today's session helpful. You'll soon receive a short evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to fill it out and return it to us. Your comments help the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee evaluate and plan future continuing education offerings. And lastly, if you're interested in viewing parts of the presentation again or sharing it with others, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. The presentation will also be archived and freely available at the ALCTS webinar website. Thank you all for joining us today. Goodbye.